The average person is said to spend 15 minutes in the bathroom. Why not take advantage of that time and learn something new? Presenting the 15-minute podcast on weird facts, crazy details, and funny particulars that you'll be able to enjoy while you're taking a on your free time. Welcome to This Shit with Sam Butler. Welcome to another episode of This Shit podcast. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I apologize for last week. I wasn't able to upload an episode, and it was due to my work schedule. I was working out of town, and it wasn't that I didn't have the episode ready. It's just the way that the studio time worked out that I had to leave to go do this job out of town, and I didn't get into the studio to record it. So I thought, okay, I'll just record it out of town like I did last time. And, well, the problem was I had no way of uploading it to the production, so the video was not going to make it. With that being said, I figured, okay, we'll take a week off, which I think I'm close to 200 episodes. It's the first time that we ever took a week off. So, and I got to admit, it was pretty fun. It was relaxing and great. So I appreciate you guys being back, listening to the podcast. I appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. And I want to thank you once again for all your support. Now, this is a good opportunity for you to subscribe, like, and hit the notifications bell. I don't do any Patreon or anything like that. So the only thing that justifies my existence as a podcast is your subscription and your like and your comments, because what that does, that generates views, and those views is how I get monetized, and that monetization doesn't go into my pocket. It goes right back into the production. I want to thank Ram. Ram's my producer on the show. He's here. He needs to make a paycheck. I mean, this is his job. So with that being said, thank you guys for all of your support. I have an interesting topic to talk about, which I try to do every week, but this one caught my eye. We're actually going to talk about the Apache chief or leader. A lot of people refer to Geronimo as the guy I'm talking about. A lot of people refer to Geronimo as a chief, although he wasn't a chief for the tribe. A lot of us ignorant people that don't know any better would say, oh yeah, Chief Geronimo, Chief Coat Cheese, Chief Crazy Horse. We assume he's a chief, but he wasn't really a chief, although he was a leader of the Apache revolt. And he rebelled against the United States. But and of course, that's the first thing we think. We think this guy was not happy with the white man and the atrocities, but in actuality, what makes Geronimo slightly different than the rest of the great leaders of the Native American tribes that rebelled against the government, or the government trying to take over their lands, was that he actually concentrated his efforts on Mexico. He had a bone to pick with Mexico. It turns out that there was an attack by Mexican soldiers onto their camp, and his mom and his dad and his wife and his children were massacred. So this is the classic revenge plot that you see in movies, where the whole family gets wiped out and he's got nothing to live for. He's got nothing to lose. And so he goes out on a mad vengeance against the Mexican government. And he focuses on the Mexican government because those are the people that attacked his camp. And I'm not really sure, although Ram and I were talking earlier about what the beef was with Mexico, but it seems like they had provided services to the Mexican president. They had been promised land, and they reneged on their promises. This created a beef, and therefore the fighting began. Well, Geronimo was particularly interested in hurting the Mexican government, and he lived in the Arizona area, which is northern Sonora. At that time, Sonora was still, Arizona was still part of Sonora. It belonged to Mexico still. So technically, these Apache tribes were Mexican. They're part of the Mexican territory, and they're fighting for land and control of the land. They're fighting to get away. Well, Geronimo became part of the Apache bands that decided not to give in to the government. At this time, which he was born in 1829. So we're talking about 1848, 1850, right around the Civil War era. Right after the Civil War is when a lot of these the expansion out west started happening, and so Geronimo is part of this generation of people that lived through the Civil War era and how the West was expanding, Mexico was expanding, and a lot of the Apaches at that time, a lot of the different tribes at that time, had started to accept and even assimilate Western culture. So we know that there was several tribes that went to Washington, and they went wearing suits and top hats because they wanted to assimilate the Western culture. And there was other groups, especially like Apaches, that never wanted to give in. Now, the word Apache comes from the Zuni word Apache, which means enemy or attacker or thief, and it was referring to them as people who thieved and attacked. So that was how the word evolved into the word Apache, which was what the Spaniards called these tribes, and it just kind of stuck as their nickname. They're not really Apache tribes, but we have like the Mescaleros, and as a matter of fact, Geronimo was part of the Mescaleros. The Mescaleros are not far from here. They're a couple of hours north of us in the Mescalero, New Mexico area, and of course Ruidoso, but they expanded much more. He was originally in northern Sonora. They're tracking him down. He's fighting a Mexican army. He's fighting the American army. He's trying to get all the revenge he can get. He finally gets trapped. He gets put into a prison, and he gets transferred from one prison to another prison. And it's at that second prison that he decides to kind of arm a little bit of a revolt, and he's able to convince about 75 Apaches to escape, and they go right back to fighting the army and the cavalry and so on and so forth. Some time passes, and they capture him again. And this time he kind of gives in and stays for a while, but he develops a very heavy drinking problem. So right now, Geronimo's a guy who's not liked by the white guys, the white man. He's not liked by the Mexican government, and he's not liked by other Apaches. And so now he's a drunk, and now nobody likes him because he's one of those, it's mala copa, he's a bad drunk, and gets tired of the lifestyle, decides, let's break out of here, breaks out again. This time they got him kind of tracked down. They kind of know how to find him. And there was other Apaches working with the government at this time, so they used their own people to track him down. It was General Crook that was out to get him, and he kept evading him. So the joke in Washington was, who's got who trapped, all right? And it was a kind of a sarcastic joke, but eventually they capture Geronimo, and he gives in, and they move him to Lawton, Oklahoma, or Fort Sill, which is a part of Oklahoma that I've spent quite a bit of time in. So it's pretty interesting to me to think that Geronimo actually spent the rest of his life there. He ended up dying later in life. Fell off a horse, and possibly a heart attack. We don't know exactly, but he just died an old man. And as time went on, he assimilated or he accustomed himself to the new lifestyle. He ended up having a farm and planting some crops and so on and so forth. And times changed. We're talking about 1850s, early 1900s. By the 1900s, 1905, Native Americans are folk heroes. Their Native American chiefs have kind of a celebrity status. He has a celebrity status, and he's invited to be a speaker. He's invited to be different places, and this is something that he took well to. He really enjoyed the attention that he got for his life, for his past life. To the point, it was so much that in 1905, he actually went to Theodore Roosevelt's inauguration, and he was part of the parade, and people were cheering. And so by 1905, he got himself accustomed to the lifestyle, and which was pretty cool if you think about it, because we never hear about that part of it. We always hear about the wars and so on and so forth, but he actually wrote an autobiography. And this autobiography, he talks about all of his adventures, and he talks about it in a way that's grandiose. So it's almost exaggerated, but it's because it's like living the good old days, the glory days. Now, all of this stuff we kind of already knew about Geronimo. If you look him up, I mean, there's a lot of articles about him and what made him unique. Now, the first thing was he wasn't a chief. He was a leader, but he was more of a medicine man. And he had developed this legendary mythical strength as a medicine man where they thought that he could make the enemy's rifles jam up. They thought that if you rode with Geronimo, he had these special supernatural powers that would make bullets evade you. So he had this reputation for being this medicine man with special supernatural powers. I thought that was pretty interesting. I'd never read that before. But what really got me thinking about doing this as an episode is that I read an article, and it said that this is part of history that's never been really revealed or talked about, and it's been kind of pushed onto the back shelf. It's been hidden history. And it turns out that, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, Geronimo actually ran around the Sonora area, which is Arizona, Sonoran Desert, northern Mexico. And those tribes, those Apache tribes in that zone, were actually Mexican tribes. They were actually part of Mexico, the Mexican territory. So by the time all of this is going down, there's about 250 to 350 years since the Spanish landed in Mexico, which is modern-day Mexico. And so all of the evangelization, all of the preaching, and it turned out, this article was saying that it turned out Geronimo was actually a Christian. He had actually converted to Catholicism, which to me was a shock, because you never hear about that. But it makes perfect sense if you think about it. A Native American, 350 years. I think the Spanish landed like in 1510. We're talking 1850s, so that's 330 years of history. Well, the United States isn't even 330 years old. So that gives you an idea how long time had passed, how much time had passed from the time that the Spaniards landed in what is Mexico, and all of the conversion that had happened in 300 years. Well, it makes perfect sense that a lot of the Native Americans would be Catholic. As a matter of fact, a lot of my friends that live up in the Mescalero area, they're Catholic, they're Christian. Actually, it's hard to tell that they're Native at all. You think they're Mexican, but they speak broken Spanish like the rest of us, and so you see, and it's pretty cool, because if you drive up towards Mescalero, there's actually two big churches on the highway, and they're very picturesque. And I always wondered like how those came about, but now it makes perfect sense. I mean, now we're talking about 500 years of conquest. And what was unique about them was that they kept their native traditions, but they also subscribed to Catholicism. Now, the other interesting fact that I thought, wow, was that they were actually fluent in Spanish. So when you think of Geronimo, you don't think of you think of a Native American leader, but you don't necessarily think that this guy is speaking Spanish and that he's Catholic and that he's actually a Mexican. And that blew my mind. So those are some of the facts that I wanted to share with you guys on this episode of the Shit Podcast. Geronimo was a very interesting figure. If you have time to read up on him, please do so. He had, obviously I can't cover everything that he was able to accomplish or not accomplish or specific battles in a 15-minute podcast. But I just wanted to bring to light the fact that the guy was actually a Mexican, spoke Spanish and was Catholic. And that to me is the shit. So with that, we'll wrap up this episode of the podcast. I want to thank you guys once again for your support. Remember to like and share, subscribe, leave your comments if you have interesting facts. I love reading on all your comments on the channel, on my Facebook page, Los Cagadienses. Thank you guys. I want to thank you guys for everything. With that being said, that wraps us up this week. Thank you guys once again for joining us. We'll catch you on the next one.